Hello, everyone. Welcome. We'll be we'll be starting in just a few minutes. Thank you for joining. Good morning to those who just joined us. We'll be starting in just a couple minutes. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We have a couple people joining now from the waiting room. We'll start in 1 minute. Please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat, and we'll get started in 1 minute. Thanks for coming. And nice to see some familiar names in the room. Hello, everyone. Thank you for introducing yourselves in the chat. Good morning and welcome. And welcome to this morning's session on the Paris Agreement's Enhanced Transparency Framework, a refresher for the Caribbean. This is a two-part webinar series that we will be having. Today is part one, which we will be covering the overview of the ETF as countries are preparing their first BTRs and also second BTRs in this region. And then part 2 will be on March 12th, where we will go more in detail into the flexibility provisions of the ETF. So just to give a brief introduction about CBIT-GSP, we are a global initiative. CBIT-GSP stands for Capacity Building Initiative Global Transparency Program. And we are, our objective is to support developing countries transition to the enhanced transparency framework of the Paris Agreement, and particularly in the areas of their biennial transparency report and all of the related topics to fulfill that reporting obligation. And we have various support modalities, and some of those include regional events like we're doing today, also in-country support where we provide targeted support to countries' needs. And today's session is brought to you by CBIT-GSP, the network, the Anglophone Caribbean Network. So this is a network that we're in, where we have 13 English-speaking Caribbean countries. And if I didn't introduce myself already, my name is Brittany Main-Rancharan, and I'm the network coordinator for the Anglophone Caribbean Network. So briefly about the two-part webinar. Today we'll be covering in part 1, a general overview of the Enhanced Transparency Framework. And we will also take a look at some of the COP30 outcomes in the context of Article 13, so in the context of the transparency article of the Paris Agreement. And then in part 2, on the 12th of March, we'll take a deeper look into the flexibility provisions that are in the modalities, procedures, and guidelines of the Enhanced Transparency Framework. So we'll take a look at the flexibilities that developing countries have and how Caribbean countries may choose to use them. And the objectives for today: reinforce the understanding of the ETF and the main requirements that you have in your biennial transparency report, the main reporting vehicle of the ETF. Reflect on COP30 decisions that link to transparency, to Article 13. We'll take a highlight, an overview, a top-down view of flexibilities and in which chapters of the BTR you have flexibilities. And then we'll have space to talk about regional lessons and regional experiences in a discussion space at the end of the session. And also prepare for continuous improvement as we look forward into this second BTR cycle. And our agenda today should take us up to 11:30 Atlantic Standard Time. So for the majority of us in the Eastern Caribbean, and it'll take us up to, we'll have our session for 1 hour and a half. So we'll have an opening with the overview of the ETF, and we'll have some space for an interactive quiz and discussion, and then the closing. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce my dear colleague, Ms. Freya Milford. She's the project officer at the UNEP Copenhagen Climate Change Center, and she supports the global CBIT-GSP project team, and now is working specifically with the Anglophone Caribbean Transparency Network. So welcome, Freya, and over to you.
Yes, thank you, Brittany. Thanks so much for the introduction and for the brief introduction to the webinar series as well. As Brittany said, my name is Freya Milford, and yeah, I'm now going to be working with Brittany more closely on the activities taking place in the Anglophone Africa network under the CBIT-GSP. So good morning to you all, even though it's good afternoon to me in Copenhagen. So I'm based here in sort of the global center. And yeah, it's great to meet you all, and I'm really looking forward to working with you all as as we continue in the BTR and ETF journey. So again, it's my pleasure to welcome you to this part one of the refresher series on the ETF for the Anglophone Caribbean Network. So as many of you know, under Article 13 of the Paris Agreement, so the ETF, the Enhanced Transparency Framework, this article established a common reporting system for reporting, reviewing, and continuous improvements of countries' reporting provisions for the Paris Agreement. So this is the BTR itself. So under this, there are many different modalities of which we'll go in today, but of course, one of the very key fundamental parts of this is recognizing very much the national circumstances and the flexibilities that are required for a lot of developing countries, including small island developing states, as what occurs many in the Anglophone Caribbean network. So over the past few years, since the deadline of the first submission for the BTR in 2024, several Caribbean countries have actually submitted their first BTRs, which is obviously an amazing feat, and it's something that I think everyone in the countries and in the reporting teams can be very proud of. And many countries are also within the network either commencing their work on their first BTR or continuing work on their first BTR to be submitted this year. So for the countries who have submitted their first BTRs already, this obviously represents a significant milestone within the region, not in just sort of meeting the international reporting obligations under the UNFCCC, but also in sort of strengthening the national systems for tracking progress, identifying gaps, and providing information on greenhouse gas emissions with clarity and credibility. So at COP30, which obviously took place in November last year, transparency again took center stage, especially to reflect on that first BTR reporting cycle. And obviously a key part of that was the emphasized importance for capacity building and sustained support for developing countries, which is obviously very much the cornerstone of what the CBIT-GSP project is, as Brittany obviously introduced just then as well. So again, it's just reaffirming that, when we talk about transparency, this is not just a compliance exercise. It can be very strategic for countries. These BTRs really offer countries a great opportunity to be able to better reflect on their national circumstances within their countries as it relates to the different areas of the BTR. So this refresher series has very much been developed, one, to reflect on these first BTR cycles that have gone through, but also as we move from this first BTR cycle towards the second cycle of reporting with that deadline for the end of this year. This webinar series is really to present an opportunity to pause, reflect, recalibrate, and refamiliarize ourselves with some of the fundamentals of the Enhanced Transparency Framework. So in part one today, as Brittany had already said, we're going to revisit some of the foundations of the ETF and also look at some of the core reporting requirements and modalities, and then also reflect on some COP30 outcomes. And more importantly, what we want out of today's session is to really create a space for any peer engagement and for you guys to discuss and to provide feedback on some of the key areas that based on your experiences, either in submitting your first BTR or just starting your work on your BTR, questions that you have about future reporting cycles, etc. We really want to make sure that we can help you to address any areas which remain unclear and what areas that are challenging and lessons that can be integrated into next reporting cycles. And this can also really help us in shaping what our support for under the CBIT-GSP to the rest of the countries can look like. So we really want to know there's going to be a presentation done by Brittany, but what we really want is for this to be as interactive and practical as possible, and to facilitate conversations between you all and hopefully answer any questions that you have. So please make use of the chat function where you all obviously introduced yourself earlier. And we really thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us this morning. And we're looking forward to this session and the next one next week. So back over to you, Brittany, and thanks again, everyone.
Thank you so much, Freya, for your opening remarks and and for the encouragement to really use this platform to discuss and to see what U.S. countries can get out of CBIT-GSP as you move along in whichever part of your BTR cycle is. I know some of the countries here are in the first phase of preparation for the BTR1, and then we have a couple countries here who are in that phase of preparation and already in the preparation of BTR2. So we look forward to hearing from you as we get to that discussion part of today's session. So now we'll take a look into the enhanced transparency framework and why does transparency matter for Caribbean countries? And Freya started developing some of these ideas already. It takes us beyond the reporting requirements, and it really provides an opportunity for countries, for Caribbean voices and island voices to share what the initiatives they're doing in this global climate process. We're small island developing states in this network, in the Anglophone Caribbean Network, and so there's a lot of opportunity to show this climate leadership, and also to show the areas of vulnerability that can increase this access to climate finance, to adaptation, loss and damage support, for example. It provides a platform to track progress on your own national climate change action. So beyond the Paris Agreement reporting, it's a way to show and track progress of your own climate policies and activities that you have in your own countries, and to communicate these priorities and challenges, both internationally and at the country level. And at the end of the day, transparency, as it is linked to the Paris Agreement, is really there to build trust and international cooperation. Since this process has been negotiated across all countries to the Paris Agreement, and it's a way for countries to show transparently what they have going on in the country, and provide the best evidence-based decision making at the national level and also at the international level as we try to meet these Paris Agreement goals, the temperature goal. So this has been a 30-year journey leading to the ETF's full implementation. So, of course, this journey started back in 1992 when the UNFCCC, the UN Framework for Climate Change Convention, was adopted in 1992 and taken into force, all the way to the 2015 when the Paris Agreement was adopted. And there are various phases along the way as negotiations progressed, where the NPGs were adopted, and then the reporting tables and reporting templates were adopted, and then we got to 2024, where the ETF, the Enhanced Transparency Framework, was fully implemented, where you had countries submitting their BTRs and for the first time, their first BTRs. And when the technical expert review cycles then initiated. And we'll take a look at more into some of these details as we move forward. And to just bring it all the way back to a quick context of the Paris Agreement, the overall objective of the Paris Agreement really has three goals. It's to strengthen the global response to the threat of climate change, to meet the long-term temperature goal, which is the 2 degrees Celsius and 1.5 degrees Celsius, limiting global long-term temperature goal to that level, to build climate resilience and low emissions development, and also to enhance financial flows to address climate change. And there's the means of implementation and the means of action. So where countries are able to address both adaptation and mitigation actions and the actions that they're taking to address climate change, and also discuss and work on the means of implementation to address climate change financially, with technology development and transfer, as well as capacity building. And within the Paris Agreement, there's this level of accountability and checking back, quality checking to see if these goals are met. And this takes place at the global stocktake, which is an ambition mechanism whereby countries are able to, at intervals, all the countries that have reported their reports to the Paris Agreement have their emissions accounted in a global stocktake to see how close we are to meeting these temperature goals. And then there's also this implementation and compliance mechanism that is involved in the technical expert review and also some other review elements of when it comes to sorry, apologies. My mic turned off just now. Yes, and then there's also the review element when it comes to the technical expert review, and also this facilitated sharing of views element, this facilitated multilateral element where countries are able to share what they have been doing within their own national reporting. And it's an opportunity for others to reflect on the initiatives of individual countries. And so when it comes to the cycle, the various cycles that are within the Paris Agreement, we have the national determined contribution. So this is where countries are preparing and communicating their own national climate targets at 5-year intervals so that they can update their ambitions, whether it's mitigation emissions targets and also adaptation goals and targets. And then now we have the ETF. So this is the implementation and evaluation phase. So the ETF is there through the report of the BTR, where countries can then reflect on a 2-year basis how they've been doing in meeting their NDC, in meeting tracking progress and achievement of their NDC, as well as reporting on elements like their emissions, adaptation, and finance received and provided. And then there's also this element of review and facilitative multilateral sharing from countries, where they're able to then have the opportunity to speak themselves on what they have included in their BTRs. And then there's the evaluation of collective progress. And so I mentioned this in the last slide, which is the global stocktake. So consideration of all outputs from all countries, reports, having a technical assessment, and then this information is shared by the UNFCCC to the global community to see how really how we're doing in terms of meeting the overall temperature goal. So transparency in the Paris Agreement, there's this element for transparency of action and transparency of support. So these are the two main elements of the enhanced transparency framework. So the idea is for parties to show and include with a lot of clarity how they have done in tracking progress towards achieving their NDCs, adaptation actions, and sharing good practices and priorities to inform the GST. And then there's this element of support, which is to provide clearly the information on support provided and received. Um, this is especially important for developed countries who are main support providers, but also for other countries who receive support, so that we can clearly assess, the flows of climate finance and have that element more transparently understood, and to provide a full overview of this aggregate financial support from the international community. This also informs the global stockpile. And the architecture of the ETF really has these three phases, which is the phase that many of us here are familiar with, this reporting phase, the BTR, what goes in there, your greenhouse gas inventory, your tracking progress of your NDCs, the support provided, mobilized, your support needed and received, and adaptation. And then there's this element of review that occurs in the technical expert review, which is a non-punitive process, and it's there to identify improvements and identify capacity building needs, and also do a consideration of progress with how countries are achieving their NDCs. So this is a new element that a new element of the review process that hadn't been included in previous review processes under the climate convention. So this is one that is unique to the BTR process. And then we have this facilitative multilateral consideration of progress, where countries then may attend an in-person session, either at the COP or at one of the subsidiary body sessions, and present what they included in their BTR, and are subject to other countries who may have posed online questions and may also pose questions to you in person. And this is a part of the transparency process. So you, as well as countries, are also able to pose questions to other countries as they submit their national reports, their BTRs in particular. And these are some key concepts and guiding principles of the ETF, and these are not uncommon to the previous reporting vehicles that were under the UNFCCC, the Climate Change Convention. So, of course, principle one is respecting national sovereignty, building on the arrangements under the convention. So there's a lot of elements under the ETF that are brought across under the ETF, providing flexibilities to developing country parties. Another important principle that carries forward from the convention, promoting these TAC principles. So these are transparency, accuracy, comparability, consistency, and comparability. There's the other C. Avoiding double counting, very important. Avoiding double counting, and this is referring to emissions. So by all costs, avoiding double counting in emissions, and then facilitating improvement over time. So these are the core principles of the ETF. The third C was completeness. That's the one I missed. Okay, so we've taken a look at the principles of the ETF, and we've taken a look at the history of how it's evolved from the Climate Change Convention to present, to where we are with the implementation of the ETF. And now we'll take an overview of the BTR reporting outline. And so we'll take a look chapter by chapter and give the highlights. And I'll just take a pause here to ensure that if anyone has any questions as we're going along, please feel free to put them in the chat, and we will address them. We will address them at the end of this session. So the biennial transparency report is the main reporting vehicle of the enhanced transparency framework. And so this is the means by which countries will communicate the activities that they're doing. And then there are these thematic chapters that are included in the BTR, chapter 1 being the National Greenhouse Gas Inventory Report. And this is a shall requirement, so this is a mandatory chapter of your BTR. Chapter 2 on progress made in implementing and achieving NDCs. This is also a mandatory requirement of the BTR. So you have 2 shall requirements so far. Chapter 3 is on climate change impacts and adaptation. This is a should requirement. So this is optional for parties to include in their BTR. But nevertheless, an important topic, especially in this regional context. Chapter 5 on financial technology transfer and capacity building support mobilized and provided. So this is a mandatory requirement, especially for developed countries or countries who have provided support to other countries. So this is a mandatory if your country has provided support to others. And then the other chapter will be on finance, technology transfer, and capacity building support needed and received. So this is indicating the needs in these 3 areas, the needs that you have and the support that's been received for the reporting period of your BTR. This is a should provision, so it's optional, but it's one that's also very important for the overall transparency and the tracking of finance and financial flows and the needs that are remaining especially for developing countries. And within these chapters of the BTR, we also have annexes that accompany each of these chapters. And so we have common reporting tables, which electronically for the electronic tracking of the national inventory report. So you can consider this all of the numbers, the activity data, the emissions data that you have in your national inventory report to the written document. And then you also have common tabular formats. So these are CTFs, and we have CTFs, which are tables or templates that allow countries to track progress in their NDC reporting period. So tracking the indicators that are within your own national NDCs and over time throughout the implementation period of your NDCs. And this is the main mechanism for tracking progress to see how you're doing at each BTR cycle, how close you are to implementing your NDC or tracking your progress so far. And then similarly, you have CTFs or common tabular formats for tracking of this information on finance, technology transfer, and capacity building. And these are both for support mobilized and provided and support needed and received. And then additional areas, additional parts of this BTR report is information on application of flexibility provisions. So you have a separate chapter on choosing, on identifying and explaining the flexibility provisions that you've used if you're a developing country party, and also a chapter on areas of improvement in reporting over time, because this improvement over time is one of the fundamental principles of the ETF. So there's a chapter on improvements that would be covered in the next BTR. And so, as I mentioned a few slides back, the ETF, one of the main principles is having flexibilities for developing country parties should they need it, who need it, who have capacity challenges, and who need flexibility in these reporting obligations. So flexibilities can look at the scope of reporting. So this may be in one of the chapters, and the depth of information that needs to be included, and we'll take a better look at this in part 2 of the session. The frequency of reporting. So you have developing country parties, and especially SIDS and LDCs who have this discretion to report at their discretion. So this is a flexibility that's specifically for SIDS and LDCs in the event of not being able to submit at the 2-year interval starting from 2024. The level of detail of reporting, this is especially in the greenhouse gas inventory and the NDC tracking chapters, and then the scope of the review. So at the technical expert review process, SIDS and LDCs have the option, for example, to have a centralized review or a regional review instead of a in-country technical expert review, as an example of the scope of the review. And these flexibilities are applied at the individual provision level. So when we get more into the flexibilities in part 2 of this session, we'll take a look at the specific provisions where you can apply flexibility. It's not overall flexibility for all parts of the report. Flexibility is self-determined, so you're not countries don't have an obligation to opt to use flexibilities if they don't think that they need it. And the capacity constraints and time frames for improvement should be included as a part of explaining the reason why countries are opting to use flexibility. And also some points, the technical expert review teams shall not review the determination to apply such flexibility because this is self-determined and nationally determined. And the technical expert review team shall take into account these flexibilities because these are available for developing countries who need them. Okay, now we'll take a look at the different chapters of the BTR. And so if you recall, we have 2 chapters of the BTR that are mandatory chapters, and the first one being the National Inventory Report of Anthropogenic Emissions, or your Greenhouse Gas Inventory Report, as many are familiar with the name of it in that way. And then these are the elements that belong specifically in the National Inventory Report as a part of the BTR, or as a separate document and annexed to the BTR. So your definitions, the information that regards your national circumstances and institutional arrangements. So this is the teams that are involved in preparing your greenhouse gas inventory report and any other national circumstances involving this process, any legislation or any policies that govern this process. The methods to be used, so the methodologies, parameters, and data. This is a large part of the report, and this is by sector, so you have sector by sector, and indicating which methodologies from the IPCC guidance that are used, the activity data that are used and collected, the data sources, and also your emission factors. And then you have information on your cross-cutting elements, such as your key category analysis, uncertainty assessment, and quality assurance and quality control plans. And then sectors and gases, so information by sector and emissions by gases, and then information on the time series. So apart from discussing individually by sector, also having a chapter specifically on the time series to indicate the national trends of emissions over time. And then if you use flexibility, any of the flexibility provisions in this chapter, then a section on the flexibility provisions that we use. And the second chapter on the information necessary to track progress in implementing and achieving your NDC. So this is the NDC tracking progress chapter. So in each of these chapters, you'll see that national circumstances and institutional arrangements are common in all of these chapters. And it's just describing any of the arrangements that are there that govern for the planning and the execution of tracking progress of NDCs in your country. And there's also this section in this chapter that describes the party's NDC. So a description of your NDC, and you have this is also embedded part in your actual NDC. And the information to track progress in implementing and achieving your NDC. So what are the assumptions that you need to track progress? What are these policies? And so forth. What are the indicators that you're choosing? And then you also have a section on mitigation policies and measures, actions, and plans. So these are your PAMs, and these include mitigation co-benefits, like adaptation actions and economic co-benefits that are related to implementing your NDC. So these are additional to the indicators that you choose to track progress on your NDC. These could be any other policies and measures. You also have within this chapter a summary of your greenhouse gas emissions and removals. As most countries, NDCs have emission-related targets. So this is why this is here. And then you have projections of greenhouse gas emissions and removals as applicable. So should you have projections of your GHGs that are linked to your NDC or your NDC tracking indicators, these would be included here. And then any other information, and then the flexibility provisions that you would use for this chapter. The chapter 3 on climate change impacts and adaptation. So you have your national circumstances and any legal frameworks, for example. We have a section to include the impacts, risks, and vulnerabilities, adaptation priorities and barriers, adaptation strategies, policies, plans, goals, progress on implementation of adaptation, any M&E frameworks that you have or processes for adaptation actions. So this could be at the sector level, at the national level, depending on the information that is available or appropriate to the country. Information on loss and damage, on averting and minimizing and addressing loss and damage. And then a section where you can indicate your good practices, experiences, and lessons learned in tracking and monitoring climate change adaptation impacts. And just to note that because this section is an optional chapter of your BTR, this information that is included here, it could be as applicable and as available for the country. So for example, if you don't have information on all sectors that are impacted by adaptation, or on all of these, all of these subsections of your adaptation chapter, this could be included as available or as applicable for the party. And then we have the next chapter on information, technology development and transfer, and capacity building support provided and mobilized. So this is especially for parties who provide support. So mandatory for those parties, developing country parties, and parties that provide support to other countries. So this is national circumstances as usual, your underlying assumptions and definitions of methodologies of what is considered in these three categories, the finance, technology, and capacity building support provided, and then information on financial support provided, and technology development and capacity building support provided. And in a similar way, this is the chapter especially for developing country parties on financial, technology, and capacity building support needed and received. So this is also a should provision for to include in your BTR. So a non-mandatory element, and it's similar in structure as the last chapter, where you explain the definitions and methodologies of what is considered finance technology development, the timeframes, for example, of support that's provided. And then you include your information on the financial support needed, and perhaps the methodologies for accounting for what is needed, and then information on what is the support received throughout the indicated time frame. And then in the same way for technology and capacity building, what are the needs and what was received within the reporting time frame. And then we have in the event that countries have joint BTRs and national communication submissions. So technically, this should occur. This should occur at the second BTR cycle, or whichever it is, the cycle where you had a national communication, which is submitted every 4 years, and a BTR every 2 years. At some point, they will overlap. So where you have the years where you have your joint submissions, these are the additional chapters that would fall in your national communication submission. So for example, you have this vulnerability assessment, climate change impacts, and adaptation measures. This is relevant in the case where your BTR does not include an adaptation component. For example, you have a chapter on research and systematic observation, and then also on education, training, and public awareness. So on the years where your BTR and NC submission are on the same year or submitted jointly, you would use the combined information of the BTR chapters and then these other chapters of the national communications. And then the chapter on areas of improvement. At the end of your BTR, you'll have a section to identify areas of improvement identified by the party, as well as those identified by the technical expert review team. So this is if you have already had a technical expert review conducted, how the party is addressing or intends to address these areas of improvements as appropriate, because one of the fundamentals of the ETF is improvement over time. So this is where this is coming in, including having a section specifically for how the party intends to address this over time, to have plans in place or written down. And then for developing country parties that need flexibility, in light of their capacities, are encouraged to highlight these areas of improvement that they had used flexibility for. So this is specifically for the developing country parties who use flexibility provisions in their BTR to include what the areas of improvement and the activities that would take place to address those flexibilities over time. And then lastly, identifying capacity building support needs, including those related to flexibility provisions and any progress made. And then if you have capacity building needs that were provided as a part of the previous technical expert review, these would also be included in this section here. So this is another area to indicate support needs related to the development of your BTR and also related to your flexibility provisions that you would have used. So we've covered the main chapters, the main elements of the different chapters of the BTR. I know it's a lot to go in one bit, but this is intended to be an overview, a reminder as countries are re-preparing this year either for their BTR2 and their BTR1. And then as a part of the entire process, the UNFCCC Secretariat has developed ETF reporting tools that are hosted online on a ETF platform where only nominated parties have access to use and compile their common reporting tables for the greenhouse gas inventories and their common tabular formats for tracking progress for the NDC and for support. So these are the tools that are available, and it's only with parties with that were nominated that have a ETF focal point, and then subsequently nominated users at the national level to include to have access to these tools. And the idea is that these tools help to facilitate countries filling out these annexes, these CRTs, and these CTFs as a mandatory requirement of their BTR. So it helps to facilitate this process, and it also provides a way to submit these tables directly as a part of your BTR submission through that online platform. So it helps to streamline data entry. So you have data entry interface on the platform where you enter some, especially for the greenhouse gas inventory tables, for your common reporting tables, where you enter the background information, and then other cross-cutting tables are automatically populated. And this is done to help facilitate that reporting burden. It has the component of enhanced accuracy because it includes these calculations and aggregations as a part of the platform. And it's there to ease future reporting, especially for developing country parties, as it archives all the different versions for created, so that you have for future reference for future reports that you can go back on. And of course, it generates the final reporting tables. And there's also this element of data integration to the UNFCCC Climate Data Hub. So only these JSON files that are generated as a part of this is the file type. This is the file type that is created at the ETF platform, from the ETF platform for the tables, can then be used to be included on the UNFCCC Climate Data Hub. So this ensures that data is available and reviewed and disseminated accurately and appropriately. Okay. Let's take a short pause just to ensure if anyone has any questions or any comments so far on the ETF, on the BTR outlines, on the reporting tools that we can take up before we go forward. Yes, go ahead, Edmund.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. Edmund Jackson, St. Vincent and Grenadines, SDU, Sustainable Development Unit. I was wondering on the issue of flexibility, how flexible is flexible? Given that the BTR is every 2 years and the NC is every 4 years, is it possible for developing countries to report only when these two align, and so you do a joint report at that point in time, so you don't have to do a BTR every time, and then so I'm asking if that is possible.
Thanks. Thank you for your question, Edmund. So technically, SIDS and LDCs have this flexibility to report their BTRs at their discretion. So that's technically, the answer is yes, you have that flexibility to report at your discretion if that you wish to report only on the years that you're reporting your national communications. So yes, technically that's a flexibility that you can do. However, I know that the financial the financial packages that are there for BTR projects and NC projects and joint BTRs and NCs may be structured a bit differently, whereby it would require efforts to report at least a singular BTR and then in the following 2 years a joint BTR and NC. That's a separate conversation, but that's usually the case for these for the financial projects, the JET projects that are available for BTR and NC submissions. But yes, technically, as a SIDS country, you have that flexibility to report at your discretion. Thanks for that. Thanks for that question. Okay. Are there any others before we any others or any other or comments before we move on to the next portion, which is giving some updates on Belen updates on property? Okay. On the go. Okay, so we'll just be giving a few updates on key outcomes that are related to transparency from COP30 that happened in November last year. So we talked about transparency and why it matters already. It's not just a reporting system. Transparency builds trust and cooperation under the Paris Agreement across all parties, developed and developing. And it involves this transition from MRV, which was under the convention, and now moves us to the enhanced transparency framework under the Paris Agreement through negotiations over time. And it builds this transition builds on accumulated experience from previous reporting cycles. So this is reflected in these common formats, these common tabular formats and common reporting tables, and the technical review process, and improves the comparability process of these reports that are both for developed and developing countries. Now, there's one mechanism. And so these at COP30, the main areas of discussion were support for developing countries. So this is finance, technical assistance, and capacity building. There's the launch of the Climate Data Hub and progress on the GHG data interface, hosted by the UNFCCC Secretariat. At COP30, we heard on experiences on the countries in their first cycle of their BTRs, completed by developing countries. So this was a chance where countries were able to reflect and share their experiences from submission, and also those who had had their first technical expert review conducted. And then there were also discussions on the timeline, composition, and terms of reference of the consultative group of experts. So that's the CGE, the body that's responsible to support developing countries, also in transparency matters and reporting under the Paris Agreement. So for the element under finance and technical support under Article 13, what the discussions included were improving the processes for financial support provision to developing countries, and whether or not there'd be a new cycle of activities to identify reporting challenges in developing countries, based on reports that had been made already. So, and as a result, we have an activity list for the next cycle that includes a survey and report on the first cycle results of the BTR, submissions from parties on experiences and challenges in implementing Article 13, and commitment of workshops to share experiences and strengthen capacities. So these are the discussions so far, but they all include using the experiences from the last BTR to then feed into what the next cycle of activities will look like. And then there's discussions on the consultative group of experts. So this is the body, the constituted body that is there to support developing countries in in the technical and capacity elements as they bridge the MRV under the convention to the enhanced transparency frameworks, and have provided key technical and capacity building support to developing country over the years. So the term of the CGE remains, and there are 27 members that are selected from the UNFCCC roster of experts. So this is, and these are a combination of different regions. There was the adoption of the revised terms of reference, and the next review of the CGE is scheduled at in 2033. So this is session 78 of the SBI. So this is these are some of the discussions, and I know that the CGE is having another meeting in next week, I believe, to further discuss the priorities for this year, and to see the outcome and schedule activities for this region. We'll see. Well, we'll see after Monday. We'll have other updates following their meeting in March. And then we have other updates here on this Climate Data Hub and Greenhouse Gas Inventory. database interface. Sorry. This is the UNFCCC's data hub ecosystem. And so this climate data hub is the central repository for climate information. It supports analysis, review, and tracking of climate action and support. And at the bond sessions in June of last year, modules for the GHG data interface were established. And these include modules for time series, detailed party data, greenhouse gas inventory, greenhouse gas profiles, flexible searches, etc. So the idea is that this should help countries facilitate their reporting over time. You'll have this central repository, and then you also have these analytical tools, which should benefit, especially developing country parties with visualizations and also support at the global level in being able to make these comparisons across countries. Also had updates on the global goal on adaptation. So at COP30, 59 voluntary global indicators to measure adaptation progress were adopted. And so these cover seven sectors there: water, agriculture, health, infrastructure, poverty, ecosystems, and cultural heritage. And 22 of these indicators are ready now, meaning they have fully developed methodologies for immediate reporting, and the remaining indicators will require more methodological development, which will be covered under a 2-year work program. And the relevance of these indicators to transparency is that now countries may use or choose to use these GGA indicators in their BTR Section 3, for example, or in their other related adaptation reporting with these indicators and methodologies available as a way to help demonstrate progress toward adaptation goals that are in ways that are transparent and measurable. And there's this is the last point on the gender adaptation plan. So the UNFCCC's gender adaptation plan, gender action plan, timeline began with the 2014 NEMA work program, and it's in 2025 at COP30, a new gender action plan was adopted. And so this gender action plan ensures that gender perspectives are integrated across all climate actions, and it's a way that now in your biennial transparency reports you can use this adopted gender action plan to show gender impacts of the different sector and chapter information that you have. So gender impacts of emission sources in NDC progress, if you have gender responsive related targets, and for example in finance or support received, how finance benefits women and girls. So in the gender action plan, you have more details on how these can be aligned with national reporting. And that is where we are up to date. Brief updates on some of the transparency related updates from COP30. I open it up again. If anyone has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat or raise a hand. And then if not, I invite all of you to take a short quiz with us, just to recap what we've digested, what we've spoken about in the first part of this webinar. So I invite you, take a screenshot, use your device, and follow the QR code there. Or you can use the code on the screen at menti.com using that code 44719973. And let me know when you're in. I've also included the link in the chat if you'd like to just directly join. Some of us are in. 4 people, 5 people, a couple more. Okay. Let's start. You have just 7 short questions. Okay, 16 of us are in here. So question 1. And this is timed, so if you'd like to compete. What is the primary reporting instrument of the ETF? This one is an easy one. Okay. I knew it was easy. Question number 2. What was the deadline for the submission of the first biennial transparency report? Easy stuff. We actually have some of our colleagues in the room who met this deadline. Right, so the correct answer is actually December 31st, 2024. And then the BTR2 cycle technically should be by December 31st, 2026, since it's submitted every 2 years. Very good. Question number 3. Which of the following information may developing countries report at their discretion in their BTRs? So these are at your discretion. Almost. Yeah, so this is actually at your discretion. Information on the costs or non-GHG benefits of mitigation actions. Actually, technically, it should also be information on financial technology transfer and capacity building. But it doesn't say here if this is needs and received or if this is what was provided. So those who selected 3, section letter C is the most correct. That was a tricky one. Okay, this is where we are so far. Ronald doing good, and Tiger Baby, very good. Just a couple more. Oops. What are the key guiding principles of the technical expert review under the ETF? Okay. So these are tricky. These words are a little similar. So it's facilitative, non-intrusive, and non-punitive. So the technical expert reviewers cannot tell a country if what your NDC goals, if they're right or wrong, but they can do a review and make suggestions. But it's not intended to be intrusive nor binding. Okay. Almost there. The ETF is built upon and enhances the existing transparency arrangements under the convention. What was the previous system called? Yeah, it was called monetary reporting and verification. This is under the convention. It now takes a new form, such as the ETF transparency, but it builds definitely on monetary reporting and verification. Very good. There we go. Almost there. As a primary purpose of the ETF is to track progress towards achieving a party's individual what? It could be for your SDGs or your national plans, but the primary purpose is one of the primary purposes is to track progress on your national determined contributions. Very good. Right. We're competing for time here. All right, Ronald still at the top. Okay, and the last question. Recognizing the capacity constraints of SIDS, what special flexibility is offered to them regarding BTR submissions? So we didn't speak in detail on all of the flexibility provisions, but we did mention on this one specifically for SIDS and LDCs, right? That they may submit their BTRs at their own discretion. So you still have an obligation to submit, but at the time of your own, at your own discretion. Very good. Congratulations to the top three. Congratulations to Ronald for making it the fastest. Then we have Tom and Tiger Baby. So congratulations and thanks for participating in this quiz. So I think these questions were quite easy, but as you can see, some of them are a bit tricky, but we do hope to get more into the details of flexibilities in March in part two of this webinar series. So I know we're coming close to the end of our session, but I wanted to open up the floor and to give you all an opportunity to speak to each other if you need on some of the areas, especially for Caribbean SIDS. The climate story that you tell in your BTR is not just about emissions, but it's about how can ETF better support countries, and we're allowing flexibilities where capacities are limited. Bringing value to this process. So if you have any reflections on what transparency areas are most important for communicating your country's climate story. We call it a story because as your report, it's not just only a reflection of your emissions and the activities that you're doing, but your overall story. Each of our countries have different circumstances. So what are the areas that are most important there? And then if you have reflections perhaps on which aspects of these ETF requirements perhaps remain unclear, or you have additional questions on as your country is preparing either your first BTR or if you have submitted your first BTR already, what's, if there are any questions still remaining as, from that first BTR submission moving into your second. So we have some colleagues here. We have two of our colleagues here who submitted their BTRs in 2024. Perhaps maybe you have reflections on these or countries. So you have a couple countries who are at the cusp of submitting their BTR1 this year as well. And this is also something that we can take and reflect on. This doesn't have to necessarily be a conversation for today, but as we move forward, we're always interested in understanding, especially from the small island developing state context, the SIDS context, how we can use this process, use the ETF to communicate stories that are, that speak to our individual circumstances as a region and as countries. I heard Mike. Is that somebody, or is that you, Freya?
I think it might have just been me moving.
Okay, no problem. Yeah, but we'll share these presentations as well, and so we have a chance to reflect. We have a chance to reflect in our next session as well. So just to summarize the session for today, as we're drawing to the end, what does all of this mean for the Caribbean? So the ETF, we've spoken about the ETF as a whole, as a framework, the BTR component, the reporting vehicle of it, and we took a look at the COP30 transparency outcomes. So these, all we've discussed today, collectively provide our countries with a structured framework to tell your complete climate story, that it's not just about emissions, but also about adaptations, the impacts that you have, and the needs that remain. Very important. That there's continued capacity and lesson learning from the BTR1 cycle. And these are linked to the activities of the CGE and also the Climate Data Hub. There's continued growth and resources available to help developing country parties ease their burden and make these data components easier and more facilitative. Adaptation progress, you have more GGA indicators that have been developed. And so this makes adaptation progress more measurable. And this is often a crucial part of the Caribbean experience, adaptation, considering that the mitigation and emissions are quite limited. There are gender responsive tools available, so that ensures that you have inclusivity in your different reporting elements. And then there's enhanced overall visibility for support needed and received to strengthen climate finance access. So this is always underpinning goal and outcome for developing countries as a whole. That we can use this BTR to our benefit to show and signal where support needed is still required, and overall it's an opportunity to showcase progress despite resource limitations while building institutional capacity. And as we look into our next session, part 2 will be focusing on a deep dive in the flexibility provision. So if you have other colleagues who will be working on your national reports, on your BTRs, or on your greenhouse gas inventory or NDC tracking, especially, we invite you to include them or share this webinar information with them. That the next session might be it'll be more a deep dive into these provisions and how they can be used. So we'll be sending reminders as well for that on the 27th. And then we hope to hear some experiences on application of these flexibilities from our countries who have submitted their first BTR. Then lastly, the last activity, the last thing, is if we kindly ask you to just give us a short evaluation, as we do at the end of each of these sessions. It helps us to grow and to improve our sessions. Go ahead. This here on the screen, and it's also in the chat, the link directly, so that you can enter this. Plus, I see a few people have logged in. It's also in the chat. Thank you for the thumbs up. And this will also be open for another 24 hours after the session. Okay. Quickly, your satisfaction with this webinar. We try to take your feedback into consideration, especially with timing, time of day, and duration. And share your key takeaways if you have any from this webinar, perhaps on the ETF, something from the BTR, on COP30. I have another question on what can we improve on next time? Takeaways. Okay, so we have some discretion afforded to SIDS and LDCs, benefits of the ETF, the principles of the ETF. Okay, thank you very much. And then we also appreciate your feedback on improvement for next time. We know that many of you are very familiar with the ETF as well. We've received a lot of requests for refreshers this year as countries were reinitiating their BTR process. So we decided to bring this at the regional level. Okay, and with that, I'd like to extend my warmest thanks and appreciation to everyone who joined and for your questions and attention. And yes, we look forward to seeing you at part 2 in March. Thank you. Thanks to Marlon in the chat. Cheers. Okay, bye-bye, everyone. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.